So then, we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end. Then there is a prophet, Yeshayahu, and he explained the time of restoration in the 61st chapter, where then we can find and get our bearings during this time of the restoration period. So a person in a normal condition can simply try to understand why the world is going through so many rough times, as if you had a ship at sea and not understanding how to get the bearings to get the ship underway properly. So let's try to find where we are at as far as the leading of the world. Those understandings were already given. Those are from Yeshayahu the prophet, Daniel. We find sections of it in Ezekiel. And those areas, they are related, some of them, with the time of restoration. So let's understand what it means. When the Messiah came a long time ago, he then completed the spring feast. That's why we have then 4 recordings of the spring feast. Then we find the autumn feast related with the sounds of the shofars. So you have then those shadow prophetic events related in Hebrews. So then when the Messiah then ascended, started then a condition of the time of a transition. When the Messiah was born, was the time of his 1,000 years of kingship. So let's understand, the first 1,000 was then the Messiah's time until 1009. From 1009 to 2009 was the time of not tabernacling. Thus the requirement for New World Order. However, the New World Order, they never did truly understand how would be then the end of the world as per the instructions, not by what they thought would be. After 2009, we find ourselves then precisely speaking of Daniel the 12th chapter, where then the angel said, knowledge would increase. And then the time of the seat was gone, and we've entered the time of the dragon. So when we read the 20th chapter of Revelation or Galah, you find then many descriptions of Nahashatan, serpent, Nahashatan, or devil deceiver. Then you find serpent, Nahashatan, or you find then destroyer, dragon. Each of those, they have a specific understanding during the period of time related with the times and the seasons. So let's try to get our bearings as we understand the world. Then this particular world is in a big, huge storm, fierce gales, and the ships are at sea going adrift. This is what the world is going through at the moment. How do we get our bearings? How do we understand what's coming in the future? As a Navy man, you always have to have your bearings in front of you before hoisting sails. You have to have direction. However, the world barely has direction. So where do we find? Where are the charts? We find in the scripture, in the true original manuscripts, we find the directives. So let's try to understand what they mean. Daniel and also Yeshayahu, they were both of them explaining the same level, however in distinct times. Daniel was after, Isaiah was much earlier. But then, generation upon generation, those prophets, they were given the tasks of always pointing the people to the instructions. They're speaking only of the set apart, only the Hebraic people. The other nations are not included. We are only speaking of the set apart. So let's not own what is not ours. Let's understand, because then we are not overburdened with what was never intended. Besides the Hebrew people, the world has no link with the holy instructions. So then we are out of it. We belong to a level of the Gentiles. During this time, as the world was then more than 1,000 years without tabernacling, then unfortunately the world has owned responsibility that's not theirs. We are speaking of the set apart only the Hebraic people. They have the task of tabernacling, not the world. The world was made for trade. So let's understand then where we are at. 1,000 years of deceit. Why deceit? Because the world had to come together with some idea of what they thought was divine. They had owned what they had the perception of tabernacling in form of church. It doesn't exist. However, there is a sense of a creator and a sense of salvation. But then Gentiles are made for trade. Though they can have a relationship with tabernacling, but Gentiles are not tabernacling. So let's understand, so then we can get our bearings. During this time, after 2009, in the level of knowledge very high, the angel decided when he spoke that in 2009 would be a level of knowledge pertinent to our time. The knowledge increased, so then whatsoever was in 2009 was enough to do the trade of the end. And those are related with the Gentiles, not set apart. Because the knowledge required for tabernacling was already known. From 1009 and before, since the Messiah was born, the knowledge of tabernacling was given. So knowledge would increase was Gentile level. As then this time, we read then in Yeshayahu, the 61st chapter, "In the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries." Let's understand what it means. It's very simple. When the Messiah, prior of his ascension, he said, "Go therefore around the world and tabernacling." In English, when you speak of tabernacling, go therefore around the world and tabernacling, it does not make sense. But we are speaking from the Hebraic viewpoint. Though we are Gentiles, we must understand from the Hebraic viewpoint. In other words, go therefore around the world and tabernacle around. But then, in Hebrew understanding is a continuing. So then, go therefore around the world tabernacling. And they did until 1009. Then the Gentiles, unfortunately, they own the instructions for themselves, but then they had to do modifications. And it truly doesn't work, because it requires the original manuscript as per what Moses taught them. So then we are finding our bearings then as Gentiles and also as set apart. Those cities, they were laid dormant. Dormant means it's there, but the time is not yet for activation. However, after 2009, instantly, the dormant time was gone. Time for reactivation. But the set apart are responsible for tabernacling. Gentiles are responsible for trade. So during this time, we find ourselves in preparing coming out of these huge gale force winds and stormy seas, ships everywhere, and no direction. And the directive it was given. Firstly then, we have to get our maps. The map is, we have a fine line until 7032 or 2032. That's the maximum limit time. How do we understand this? We understand this when the Messiah spent time with the Samaritans. He was there on Mount Gerizim, Mount of Prostration, or Mountain of Favor. Then he went up there, he opened the seals, and then the understanding of tabernacling started from the viewpoint of the Messiah as himself then in charge. Then, prior of his ascension, then he gave the order to go on with it. When he spent time with the Samaritans, he spent time with them 5032. He was born in 4999. How do we know this? The computer was able to calculate the reversal until his time. Because of the Hebrew culture, we understand there are feasts. Every year there are feasts, times and seasons. You have spring feast, you have autumn feast. And when you read Leviticus, then the year is subdivided amongst the many feasts. Those became the standards of time. This is how you count the prophecy's time. He spent 2 Yom creation days with the Samaritans. 2,000 years, 1,000 each. So then, 4999 he was born. He was spending time with the Samaritans 5032. He gave them 2 days. When he went to a Gentile country, he was indicating tabernacling was also involved with the Gentiles. However, Gentiles, they would have their trade for 2,000 years. And the Messiah during this time of his 1,000 would then be in charge of the Holy of Holies, and he was. But then we won't mix tabernacling and Gentile level. The Messiah gave 2,000 years of trade. However, tabernacling, we subdivide tabernacling in 2 ways. We find tabernacling from his time of birth until 1009. Then we find not tabernacling from 1009 to 2009. Then we are during the time of restoration found in Yeshayahu, the 61st chapter, where the cities that used to be are then re-establishing. But the world continues with trade. But then we must then understand that whatsoever was learned during the time of the seat can't be used in the future. So then from 5032, 2000 would be 7032 or 2032. That's the maximum of those 2,000 years given. So we have roughly 20 years, not even 20 years. So then we understand the times and the seasons. So what's coming then in the future? When we read Gala 1:8 or then Revelation 1:8, let's explain what it means. Revelation was translated from the original manuscripts. Obviously, they were translated from Hebrew. You can't have direct holy documents from the lineage of the Hebrew spoken in another language. It doesn't make sense. Because tabernacling is Hebrew. It can't be changed. So we must understand when the translators were translating, they were reading from Hebrew documents. But then the translators, they did not understand the timing, the seasons, the feasts, and the prophetic times with those. They did not understand. So they had on their desks over there many kinds of Megillas. Megillas are simply writing material in the form of a tube. Many of them stacked up on a table or on a desk. So they went through those documents and they tried to put together the best they could. But they did not understand what they were doing. So when you read Revelation, the first section of Revelation, first, second, and third chapters, you find then the cities of the Messiah during the time of Yohanan. They were in sin. Those that don't belong with the autumn feast, Revelation, do they? No, they belong with the time of the spring feast and after. When we read Galah 1:8, we are reading Yeshayahu the 61st chapter. When you are reading Galah 1:8, you are reading Daniel the 12th chapter, Daniel then the 11th chapter, Daniel the 2nd chapter. It doesn't belong with the autumn feast. It belongs to our time, from 2009 until prior of the starting of the autumn feast. Autumn feast starts when the first sound of the shofar starts. Does then the sound of the shofar? So when the Messiah came down from Mount Gerizim, what was left was then the sounding of the shofar. So then chapter 1:8 belongs to our time. Time of restoration of the holy cities, speaking of tabernacling, not trade. But time of trade simultaneously ends in 2032. So what can we expect from nations? Daniel the 11th chapter explains the relationship with the kingdom of the north, Soviet Union, and kingdom of the south, the entire continent of Africa. Africa is yet birthing. We understand per the statue of Daniel, each metal represents a kingdom. Then you find gold, you find silver, you find bronze, and you find iron. Each of those with a specific leader per time. The leader of the kingdom of the north is Vladimir Putin. The leader of the kingdom of the east is Mr. Xi. And the kingdom of the south, there is no name yet. So then when you read Daniel, you read the relationship of the Soviet Union with Africa. But Africa thus far must have lots of organization until we establish a representative for the kingdom of the south. Thus then the re-establishment of the Black Pharaohs. Why plural? Because they were in charge for many years. But then, as far as we understand, these sections of iron, we understand the kingdom of the north is iron, the kingdom of the east is iron, the kingdom of the south is iron, the rest is clay. Because we are during a time where there is a delineation of those nations from the base of the statue having relationship. Some of the countries would be strong, some of the countries would be weak. Some of the kingdoms would be strong. Then you find the kingdom of the north, iron. Kingdom of the east, iron. Kingdom of the south, iron. And the rest became clay. The rest must do the work. So then what can we expect from the near future? We understand as far as this trade is concerned, let's forget tabernacling. Trade is then BRICS, for instance, Brazil, Soviet Union, India, China, and then South Africa became BRICS. So the understanding is already clear. You find then South Africa then included in the BRICS. So then South Africa represents the entire continent of Africa. As far as the leader of the Southern Kingdom, we don't know yet. We know the North and we know the East. We don't know the South yet. But we understand shortly, from a very short time, then the South African country became part of the BRIC. And who is leading the BRICS? The Soviets. So then, when Mr. Putin from the North was re-elected, he visited China. When China had a new leader, visited with the Soviet Union. It used to be Soviet Union. However, when you read the 11th chapter of Daniel, you find very precisely, then the kingdom of the north would be grander than the former. Because China is socialist, you can understand the northern kingdom is going to become socialist at some point. So then, and then later comes the military activity of the northern kingdom related with much equipment. But as far as the war is for much later in the future. But prior of understanding of much equipment of military, you have to understand much equipment of the regular industry. So then we understand the north, we understand the east, we understand the south, except the king or the kingdom of the south, or the representative, or then the black pharaoh of the south. Then we understand the Messiah during this time of the restoration period. He said, and the freighters of the earth. You find references of it. However, you find then precisely on 8th chapter, then you find in the freighters of the earth. Then we have to understand these areas as then freighters in charge, because we are speaking of trade. Daniel was a tradesperson. Though he was a prophet, but then he had very limited understanding of tabernacling during his time. Not because of his lack of ability, but because he was a person representing the entire trades understanding of the Gentile level. And what was his remark? He was instructed at the end of time, knowledge would increase for trades purposes. When knowledge goes higher and higher and higher, you understand only a word, computer. So then the 2009 sets the standard of what was required for trade of the end using computers. So then lock on knowledge, computer, trade. That's the whole game of the Gentile level. It was already given. Then you find the kingdom of the south with no leader yet. Raw materials. You find the kingdom of the north, the planner. In the kingdom of the east, the factory. But during this time, as the plans of the nations, they flow through the north, must have no BS. And you know what BS means. If politicians, they are not trained in trade, manufacturing, industry, they don't belong in the system. That's the reason for the flowing through the northern kingdom, because there is no BS up there. It's a brutal understanding of what it takes to get the job done. That's why you find them then leading the planning part of it. Because China at some point won't be able to handle the demand because of the new system coming. Try to understand, we are speaking from a time where we are at the ocean. There is a huge storm going on, huge seas. We don't know where we are going. We are adrift. And the wind is blowing, gales, cyclone strength winds, and we have no direction, no map. But we are understanding the situation so we can get our bearings. So we have then kingdom of the east, north, and the south. So the engine of the system to come shortly in the next 36 months is already starting. The relationship with the east and north already very strong. The Bank of China is already linking up those kingdoms with their banking system. So try to understand what is going to be later in the future. As time goes by and America then becomes no longer influential, or the US monetary system breaks, then the yen takes over via their system. If we in the US we take seriously as far as taxation via freighting, we might be able to have a subsystem of our own. But at the moment we are speaking of the main engine of this system yet to come. East, north, and south. As you have raw materials, a planner, and a person producing, you understand then the engine starting. The next 36 months you can understand this factor. A very strong relationship with the east, north, and south, primarily. Because the rest of the world became complicated. Europe became complicated. They became scandalized. They tried to come up with a system of their own, the Eurozone. Very complicated. Americas are absolutely in a position where the North is wallowing around, lost. The South, they are part of the BRICS. The leader of the BRICS is the Soviet Union. And Africa became the last member and the most important. So because of the complications of the European Union, complications of the Americans of the North, you find wallowing around in North America, you find wallowing around then in Europe. What is the simplest way of having an engine of a system? East, north, and then south. Establishing a very strong relationship. The Northern Kingdom simply adjusts the brick and bricks. Where to get raw materials, transportation, make sure it gets done on time, gives to the East, they produce. Thus you have an engine. Always flowing in this engine, providing what is required to make sure the system then is ready for the future. When the time comes, and if US does not work in a subsystem, then our money is going to be ruined. And then there's going to be a huge void in the world's market because the US money then is down. Instantly they download on their computers the Chinese system. Makes up for it. But then the time for China is going to be very strict. Time is very short. They must have plans that are 100% backed up, transported, and then clean. Thus the Kingdom of the North making the plans. And the South providing those raw materials. Then the other areas of the world, Europe, they have to break apart. Because the system then is available so they can take care of their own problems. And then the rest of the world then downloading their computers and they can do trade with the rest of the world. So we are in the stormy end, but at least we have an idea what's coming. Then we have to speak also of the Eurozone breaking, and then United Kingdom, obviously, then being separated. Why should it be separated? Let's understand why. The realm are composed with 15 countries, or 15 realms. Some of them, Jamaica, you find in Australia, you find New Zealand, some islands of the Atlantic, Northern Ireland. Then these countries are going to start, or these realms, they're going to start doing trade with this new system in the future. Because they are linked with a realm of the United Kingdom, let me ask you this. As these people, they begin to do trade with the Chinese system, begin to earn, do you think they're going to pay their dues? Let's understand from human nature. When you begin to invest your money, you begin to get double for it. And you are part of another subsystem. Are they going to give your money away to the subsystem to maintain, or are you going to invest more of your money? It's very tempting. Some people, they don't have the makeup to do what is proper. They are going to invest themselves. Why? Because it is confidential. The realm won't be able to sneak around trying to find, this realm over there is doing nicely. How do you know? Can you get in the system to find out? No. And they're going to maintain a secret. In turn, they're going to say, we don't have money. We want you to pay for the services of ours, to maintain the roads, maintain the water system, maintain electricity. While they themselves, they know what they are doing, they are investing even more and earning more. But then, it is secret. The only way they can know what they are doing as far as flow is concerned of funding is via what they order. When the label is printed and directed, then you find a parcel, a description of the product, price, and taxation. It's the only way you find what a country is doing or realm is doing. So that's why then produces imbalance in the subsystem. Thus has to be separated. Either these or then the realm or the United Kingdom must come up with a subsystem of their own where they have to maintain a clean level from every realm, an instant taxation system of their own. Then they have to be integrated under a leadership only. And as we understand the realms, they have limited powers. Now the question is, would they want to relinquish the limited power for a power of United Kingdom? Of course not. So the only outcome of the situation is the separation of the United Kingdom because of the system. And then similarly with the Eurozone. There are signs of the Eurozone already breaking. Spain, the Greco country. And then these countries, when they start investing, they are not going to pay their dues because whatsoever they earn is confidential. So then the world knows what to expect from the future. At least we have our bearings. Yeah, the ocean is very raging, the waves are big and ships are adrift, but they know what's coming. So at the moment, the best is stabilizing the situation until calm weather comes.